Us. Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to read a section from my book, The Budo Blueprint, but I don't know if I've read it before or not. I can't remember, but it's a good section, so I thought even if I have, I'll read it again. Us, Mike, spring like WA. Well, that's good. It's kind of pretty beautiful here today too. I can't really show you too much, but you can see the beautiful sunlight out the window there. So it's going to be a beautiful day. Us, Rochelle, good to see you. Oh, your son's moving to Stavanger. What's he going to study in Stavanger, Torbjörn? Us, Frederick, how are you? Look, Rochelle, got my Canadian mug. The Canadian word that can change any sentence into a question, eh? This is our most popular Canadian saying we receive the most flack about, eh? Us, Geza, good to see you. Rob spoke to me before. We'll catch up. I've got to talk to you about the self-defense stuff for your grading. Paddy, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing okay down there. Thank God it's Friday indeed, Herman. How are you? And Rob from Tassie. Dave Avola, good to see your name, man. And Marco, was, yep, good on you. So today I'm going to read a section which I think is interesting, and it's good that Mike Clark is here because, if he comes to the Gold Coast, man, if he needs a place to stay, we've got a spare bedroom and everything. So anyway, we'll talk about that another time. Us, mon ami Francis from Montreal. So I'm going to read this section from the Budo Blueprint. And it's in the shingi-tai section, though it's not the main body of shingi-tai. And I've got a feeling, I haven't really reread it, but I have a feeling that I've quoted your book in this section again, Mike. Oh, it's Chrissy. Good to see you, man. So I'm going to, I'm sitting on the edge of my T-shirt here. I'm going to read that anyway, and we'll go from there. If you've got any questions, Kenneth, stay safe in Melbourne down there. All you guys in Victoria, man, we think about you, and especially those two idiot girls that came up to Queensland and broke all the rules, lied on their declarations and everything like that. But it'll all come out in the wash. The truth shall make you whole. So this section is from the section on shingi-tai, and I'm going to read that through now, and I'll pause every now and then. If you've got any questions, the invoice is in the mail. Beautiful. The catch is I've moved. Well, even if I haven't, I'll tell you I've moved. And it's got some interesting stuff. So if you've got any questions along the way, put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that I get back to them. Well, yeah, that's true too. That was a bit crazy, those security guards. But before we get going, Patreon family, once again, I'm very grateful. You really have no idea what a difference it's making for me to be able to do all this. Quite seriously, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing with the videos if it wasn't for the support from the Patreon family. So I really love you all for that. Thanks for becoming part of the family and for committing to that little bit every month. I really appreciate it. Some great stuff. I want to do the live Zoom sessions in the next couple of weeks. So if you're part of the Patreon family, get ready for that. We'll be doing the one-on-one, two-on-one, depends how many people come along, and get your questions, whether it's training or anything else, ready. Otherwise, if you're not part of the Patreon family, why not? Come and join us. We have fun. And also, if you haven't subscribed, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell so you get the notifications. Okay, that's all that stuff out of the way. Now let's get going with the reading. Mind is expressed through the body. Indeed, it is mental habits of strength or weakness that determine the body you have. The body is expressed through technique, and technique is expressed through the application of willpower. The body must be well conditioned and strong enough to generate the forces the warrior's mind can generate. That's a double there. I'll fix that later. Technique requires a powerful mind will, rightly applied, to be complete. Mind, technique, body, none stands alone. All three must be trained as one. Of the three, mind is the most important. A high level of technique will compensate for a weaker body. A strong body will compensate for lesser technique. But a strong will, a strong mind, will compensate for everything. This is shin-gi-tai. The different approaches taken by different students, even in the same martial art, can be determined by the hierarchy of importance, the order in which these three aspects are prioritized. Urs Paul aus Deutschland. Good to see you, man. Hope everything's good in Germany. And Clarence from South Africa. That's pretty well it. We've got all the continents covered now. Thanks for coming. Interpretations of the shin-gi-tai concept vary, some more esoteric than others, but each serving a purpose. The interpretation presented here is simple and practical. Sosai said we should have our eyes high with hope and our head low with humility. In this spirit, keep the feet firmly planted on the ground and use the concept of shin-gi-tai to your advantage. First of all, let's look at how a clear understanding of the concept helps us in daily training. From the perspective of a martial art, shin-gi-tai cannot be separated. The early masters who worked hard to spread the value of karate wanted the art to be, above all else, a path of spiritual and intellectual depth, no matter how pragmatic and powerful it was as a fighting system. The primary objective of Budo training was always the development of the highest qualities of human character without compromising skills and physical preparation. This is what makes a training path complete. Without a balance of all three, this vitally important character development is missing. And if that happens, even after many years of training, many are left somewhat unfulfilled. They know there has to be something else, something more. And I quote Sosai, karate would probably not survive long if it were no more than a technique for fighting. Its vitality and its continued appeal derive from its nature as a fusion of formal techniques with a deeper way of the spirit. For this reason, karate should not be regarded as a martial art to be used in defeating an enemy, but as a means of self-development in both the physical and the spiritual sense. In sum, karate properly viewed is a way of perfecting the character. That was a quote from Sosai. Ketz, good to see you, man. Urs, thanks for coming. Do you think it's easier to focus on the mind as we get older and our bodies are not quite willing? Good question, Gaz. Urs, Daniel, good to see you. But no, I don't think so. Actually, I'll tell you what I think. I think that if you don't discipline the mind and develop very strong habits before the age of 25, it becomes very difficult to undo the old ways and redo some new ones. Karate gives you that, of course, because you go into the dojo every day and you spend those hours focused and disciplined on what you're doing. But if you haven't developed habits of mental stability and control when you're young, I have to admit, it gets hard. I mean, you've only got to look around and you see people at all ages, even 50s, 60s, 70s. Usrod, good to see you, man. You know, even into their old age, and they still haven't disciplined the mind. They still can't get control of the most basic instincts, if you like, because they never worked on developing the mind before they were 25. So that's why in my book, in the Budo Karate, I go into that section about the black belts and how up to a certain point, the black belt is focused on the physical. Then from that point, it becomes the mental. And then after that, it becomes a spiritual. But you can't go from physical to spiritual and expect to make the leap without having disciplined the mind, because spiritual training is all about having a disciplined mind. Many grow old, they don't grow up, yes. I once heard a lecture by a man who was a pretty brilliant man. He was talking about men who grow up and don't get control of themselves, their mind. And he was talking about playboys. And he said, "What's a playboy?" And he said, "A playboy is a man who's a boy who wants to play." He's immature, he's insecure, he's insufficient, and he hasn't grown up. So good question, Gaz, because it's always the good questions that get answers that we value. That's why it's so important to get kids involved in a disciplinary form before even the age of 15 or 16, because if they don't develop really solid habits by 25, it really does become difficult after that. Now, let me look at another viewpoint of your question. Is it easy to focus on the mind as we get older, as our bodies aren't quite willing? Well, in a way, yes, because you have to. Because like you said, the body's not willing anymore. The brain says go and the body says no, especially the knees and the joints. And, if you've got injuries and so on, because you haven't trained intelligently when you're younger. So in one respect, yeah, you have more time to train the mind, whether you like it or not. Horse Leo, there we go. There's South America. We've got them all now. So let me keep going here. We see, therefore, that training in karate not only requires that all three aspects of the shingi-tai be considered and addressed, but in fact, awareness and application of all three are indispensable for the art to be complete. Masoyama often quoted the words of Blaise Pascal: "Justice without strength is powerless. Strength without justice is tyranny." This is an apt description of training when the balance is missing. Colombian coffee from a Canadian mug. How about that, Leo? Leo's in Colombia. Shin, kokoro, mind, spirit. Shin and kokoro are Japanese language variations of the exact same word. It covers all aspects of the mind: attitude, training mindset, heart, spirit, willpower, volition, character, mental habits, and and the strategic and tactical intelligence for success in battle. Shin represents the application of the power of the mind in training and in life. It also represents what we describe in English as the spiritual. There are four main aspects of Shin that are important in karate training: applying the will, projection of presence, development of character, and application of strategy and tactics in battle. Yogananda said, "Mind is the wielder of muscles. The power generated through the body depends on the degree of will applied. No technique is possible and no power is available without the mind willing it so. Grow and strengthen the mind through challenging, training, and developing habits of right attitude and right behavior." So that's exactly what we're talking about there, Gaz, with your question. That's what you've got to do. You've got to develop good habits and the right attitude from very young. And this is, not that I'm a proselytizer, but where the Bible says, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." But it doesn't mean you go around hitting kids with canes. That's not what rod means. The correct interpretation of "spare the rod and spoil the child" is the rod is a metaphor for discipline. And if you don't discipline your children, they grow up with all kinds of trouble. And one of the best ways to discipline, of course, is in the dojo, teaching them to accept challenges in training and to develop good habits. Cultivate the spirit through perseverance and facing life's challenges with equanimity. Express the confidence of experience. Presence in kumite determines the ability to execute and complete techniques. Presence is the projection of confidence. That reminds me of an interesting story about one of Kyokushin's great tournament champions, Kenji Midori. I acted as the interpreter at the 5th World Tournament in 91, and one of the duties was supervising the drug tests of the top finishers. After the tournament, I spent varying lengths of time with each of the top 16 fighters as part of the testing requirements. Whilst waiting for Midori to complete his sample, that can and did take a long time when the fighter is dehydrated, he relayed to me a fascinating insight that showed his tremendous strength of character and mind. And I felt quite privileged because it was just Midori and me alone in this room, standing face to face whilst I'm waiting for him to give me a sample. And it took a while. So this is when he told me this story. As you may know, there is no weight division. This no weight division Kyokushin World Tournament saw over 250 athletes selected from around the world compete non-stop over 3 days in a single elimination event until only the single champion remained. 60 kilograms or 120 kilograms all compete in the same competition. Only mouthpieces and groin cups were allowed. No gloves or shin guards were permitted in this full contact knockout event. It was not only a battle of skill and power, but also of supreme physical and mental resilience. As the tournament continued over 3 days, injuries, especially to shins, ribs, knuckles, and thighs, would accumulate. At the beginning of day 3, the final 32 competitors broke boards, 4 breaks each with seiken, shuto, hiji, and sokuto, kick. Midori, weighing in at just 71 kilograms, wanted to do his best, and he made a huge attempt in his first break, that is with the seiken. The board break was successful, but alas, he snapped clean his third metacarpal, the long bone behind the ring finger, just there. Midori didn't utter a word, nor did he show any hint of pain on his face. He completed all 4 breaks, then casually reported to the medical section and asked if they would tape his hand. The doctor probed the hand and felt the obvious break and asked Midori about it. Midori denied anything and simply said it was an old injury. The doctor continued to push and probe, and according to Midori, even though he held a completely neutral gaze at the doctor, inside he was almost blacking out with pain every time the doctor poked and jabbed his broken hand. The doctor shrugged, wrapped his hand, and off went Midori to prepare for the next match. He did not say anything to anyone, not a word to his coach, his teammates, even his friends and family. Why? Midori said to me, because I knew that even if they meant well, they may have said something that could have planted even the smallest seed of doubt in my mind. To win, I had to be 100% mentally strong, and allowing the thought of a broken hand to register on my mind for even a moment could have been enough to change that. So I simply shut it out of my mind. Midori had prepared for this tournament with one goal: to win, absolutely. At 71 kilograms and 166 centimeters, 71 kilograms, what's that? That's 156 pounds, and 166 is maybe 5'5", 5'6". He's not a big man. He was one of the smallest in the open weight tournament, but in his mind, he was a giant, unbeatable, the champion to be, and that required an unassailable will. Even a well-meaning comment or even thought from his coach or teammates could have created a tiny moment of self-doubt. He would not for a second allow that into his consciousness. And that's pretty amazing when you think about it. You know, it's like we've got these voices inside our head. We used to talk about the genie inside, you know, and you say, gosh, I'm tired. And the genie goes, okay, whatever wish you want, the genie will fulfill. I'm tired. Okay. I'm sore. Okay. I'm strong. Okay. I'm willing. Okay. Whatever you say, the genie will listen. So the warrior Midori fought on through the last day, 4th round, 5th round, quarterfinal, semi-final, and final, achieving his glorious victory without the pain of that broken hand ever interrupting his single-minded intent and indefatigable willpower. Only after the victory was his and he could rest did he confide in his coach that he had broken his hand in the first board break early that day. That is a tremendous example of the warrior's mind. Remember that next time you bump your shin and want to sit out the next round. I remember in 2000, yeah, it's next level, that's for sure. I remember in 2000, I was invited to give a series of talks to the Australian Olympic swim team before the Olympics, and consequently building up to that with some of the development squads. And the coaches pointed out that one of the main problems they have was because, Australia places a lot of time and energy in the swim team because they've always done pretty well at that. So the athletes were kind of used to being looked after. And he said sometimes they'll just get a little chipped nail or something and it's almost like the whole world had collapsed down. So I went and I told them the story of Midori, and I told them the story of how different people in Kyokushin over time had fought through amazing things with, smash shins. And I remember Gary O'Neill in the 6th World Tournament, the tournament after Midori, he fought through. He was the same weight as Midori, 71 Ks, and he'd fought through. And on his semi-final was against Yamaki, the eventual winner of the tournament. And between the quarterfinal and the semi-final, he rested a little. Then when they told us that it was about, I asked them to let me know when it was half an hour before the bout. And so there was demonstrations on and everything. So Gary got up from his seat and he literally could hardly walk. He was shuffling and then shuffling a little quicker and then stretched his legs a little bit and then started to move and it literally took him 10 minutes before he could get back his rhythm again. His body was so beat up. And that's one of the big values that people underestimate about Kyokushin, is it just teaches you to deal with adversity in such a beautiful way. I feel that modern times require shingi-tai principle to keep on thriving. Mind strength is the bridge towards harmony with ourselves. My 2 cents. Well, it's a good 2 cents. That's true. The mind is the bridge to everything, and if you can discipline the mind, you can discipline everything. The body will listen to the mind. It's very, very true. Even physically, I teach the guys a principle that I've spoken about on the things called dominant head position. And what the dominant head position is maintaining the correct head shape so that your spinal chain from all the way down from your sacrum all the way to the top is correct. And if you do that correctly, even when you get a hit, you can take a better hit. But also what happens is if you can dominate their head position, you can dominate their movement. And the way you'll know that is if someone pushes hard, they don't have to even hit. They just need to push you hard. Your whole body will follow. So we use the saying where the head leads, the body will follow. Well, it's exactly the same with the mind. Where the mind leads, the body will follow. And that's that genie inside that's listening to you when you say you're tired. He goes, okay, if you're tired, you're tired. Nothing I can do about it. But it won't just happen. Those who teach karate must teach this stuff. Yes, that's true. You've got to live by example. There's only so much you can do through talking about it. There's plenty of those around. You see them all the time. And I have to say, there's plenty of them in Kyokushin too, the people who have had a distinguished career even early on, but then they tend to, basically throw the towel in. They think that they've done enough and they don't have to keep training. Shogai no shugyo karate no michi ni suji. In the Dojo Kun, the last line. Shogai no shugyo karate no michi ni suji kyokushin no michi o mattou suru koto. Shogai no shugyo means lifetime discipline, lifetime training. So in the English translation, they say, all our lives through the discipline of karate. Shogai no shugyo, karate no michi ni tsuji, through the path of karate. Kyokushin no michi o mattou suru koto, which means we will continue on until we realize the completeness of the Kyokushin path. You know, it's not just something you do for a few years and then move on. And I can tell you now, I've had plenty of phone calls from past students who have regretted doing that, but I've never had a phone call from one who's continued training ring up saying, gee, I wish I spent my time doing something else. It doesn't work that way. It's a lifetime. Okay, let's keep going on with this. I would suggest that one of the primary differences between sport and Budo is right there in the shin facet of shingi-tai, in the deliberate and conscious development of the character. To some degree, what separates karate and many other martial arts from pure sports training is the key component of conscious character development that manifests in the ultimate goals of the activities. And you can see the difference between fighting arts that aren't really a Budo, they're just a fighting sport, and martial arts. And the problem is it's a bell curve. Even within strong martial arts, you have this portion over here. It's just people who are they're weak. They don't train hard. They never will train hard. They don't want to train hard. They just want to be connected to the strong martial art. And then you have the body of people who do benefit from it and who are strong and who train hard and all that. And then you have the 10% over here. It doesn't matter what you do, they'll be strong anyway. Okay. And then you have fighting arts, which have no real spiritual side to it other than what they get through their own personal efforts. And it's the same bell curve. You got a bunch of hangers on, you got a bunch of guys who are really strong, and you got the body of people that benefit from it physically. But what makes a martial art even more beautiful, I think, is that there's a conscious character development. So that conscious character development, that manifests in the ultimate goals of the activities. For sports, arguably, the ultimate goal is a gold medal or a world title. That only represents a small part of martial arts. And whilst character development is encouraged and spoken about in many sports, it is a primary objective of karate, not a byproduct of a well-developed team culture. Nevertheless, shingi-tai, in one respect or another, is often well developed wherever you have the pursuit of mastery, especially mastery of movement. The mind, body, and technique are, after all, inseparable no matter what the activity. In sport, at every level, you will find tremendous expression of willpower, along with the perfectly drilled technique and the superbly conditioned bodies. Look at the final lap of a close race at the Olympics or the last few minutes of a closely fought football game to see athletes struggling with all their heart to achieve an important victory. In refining skills in sport, especially at the elite level, nothing is complete without all three facets, mind, skill, and body, finding expression in one form or another. I've got a box here. Insert box. Anyway, I'll read that. It says, matches are won and lost in the mind. Never let yourself entertain thoughts of weakness or insufficiency. Always believe without total conviction. Always believe with total conviction you have strength and skill necessary to achieve and work tirelessly. Making a typo there. Work tirelessly to fulfill that destiny. Masayama said that if one has a choice between the easy way and the hard way, always choose the hard way. Why? This is how the mind is constantly strengthened. In time, even seemingly impossible challenges are overcome without any doubt entering the mind. Trying to keep awareness at the center point. The more awareness sits in thoughts, the more it forces overthinking and invention of own realities. Well, that's good. I mean, that keeping centered, that's one way to do it. Keep your consciousness at the Seika Tanden when you breathe and everything. And isn't it interesting? Because the mind leads the body. So when you consciously place your mind there, the body calms down. It becomes equilibrated. Being a big guy has its downfalls. When receiving a strike, a large person tends to take the full impact. Well, yeah, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. There's no doubt about that. It's like learning a bike. You've got to learn it at 3 and 4 and 5 years old, not 35, because it's a lot further to the pavement when you're that age. I agree. Well, my karate sensei must unite. Yeah, I think we have a responsibility. Let me keep going. This is why martial arts training fulfills the role of religion for many. If not religion per se, they are at least cultivated together. In my childhood, apart from the example set by my wonderful parents, character development, training, and developing righteous values was achieved through a combination of Boy Scouts and the guidance of a kind-hearted local pastor at the church school on Wednesday afternoons and Sunday mornings. Today, the role of both the Scouts and Sunday school in many communities has diminished, and in some countries and communities, it has never really figured prominently for many generations. Thankfully, the void has been filled by martial arts dojos where both children and adults alike are training their spirit and developing their characters in a balanced and virtuous way that benefits both the individual student and society in general. In an increasingly secular society, if that void is not filled with some kind of lifelong character development, individuals everywhere, are left with a void in their heart without purpose or meaning. There is another important aspect of Shin. That is the aspect which embraces the qualities of goodness, where the strongest warriors are also characters of kindness and humility. Look at fight traditions worldwide, whether it is the wrestling of India, Turkey, or even Senegal, the striking arts of Europe, China, Okinawa, and Japan, or the fighting traditions of warriors of any culture. There are always mental, spiritual, and educational and cultural aspects. Fighting traditions worldwide are rarely, if ever, only about fighting. Just going to change a word there. Even though many have been so in darker times, even modern-day military services pride themselves on traditions and the numerous exceptional qualities of the heart and mind of its members. Being a Green Beret, SAS, or US Marine is more than mastery of guerrilla warfare. The SAS, as does every modern military system, prides itself on the quality of the warriors it creates. Even the greatest war epic ever written, the Mahabharata of ancient India, with the heroic tale of the Battle of Kurukshetra, is above all a scripture of the deepest spiritual wisdom and learning, with every event and personality therein a metaphor for some aspect of the inner battle of life. It has survived millenniums, not so much thanks to its tales on the battlefield of ancient days, but primarily because of the spiritual teachings it imparts. It's interesting, I'm a guy that I sometimes get to train with. Exactly, I was going to mention the Knights, I'm glad you did. There's a gentleman I get to train with every now and then. He's a lot younger than me, but he's a retired SAS. And when we grapple together, we'll take a position that we're drilling. And literally I will be down and we'll be smashing and going hard. And before he does anything, he'll say, "Are you ready, sir?" And I'll go, "Yes, sir," just out of habit. He's so polite out of habit that's been drilled into him through years as an SAS. "Are you ready, sir?" He will never move unless I confirm that I'm ready. I'm a lot older, so he's just looking after me. But you get my drift, in the military. And like Mike says, the knights, the chivalry of the knights of old, it's very similar to in many respects to Bushido of Japan. Whether in ancient times or modern, every act of war is a metaphor for some area of life to be learned from, a spiritual lesson, and training in the martial arts is no different. It is very rare that someone would train seriously for 40 years and develop superlative technique without learning the civilities and wisdom of a warrior. In fact, if training was about fighting skill only, few would last beyond a young tournament career. And that happens in fighting sports where there is no real deep spiritual connection to it. They fight in the ring and they retire. Not that they want to, they just have nothing else. They go looking for something else. There are fight sports where the goal is 100% winning and making a living off the prize money, of course. Many of the competitors lose touch with their civility, humanity, and dignity and resort to PEDs, to performance-enhancing drugs, fight throwing, violence, a win-at-all-costs attitude. So for the student who embraces the martial arts in their entirety with the aim of becoming a complete martial artist, this facet cannot be ignored. Fighting is not necessarily violent. There are a lot of activities that are far more violent and inhumane than the fight world. Corporate theft is violent. Unfair, one-sided commerce is violent. The strong preying on the weak is violent. Road rage is violent. The martial arts begins and ends with courtesy and respect. The commonly seen antics of many professional fighters, where one athlete belittles and humiliates another, is an embarrassment rationalized and dismissed as just part of the promotional hype. Yet that kind of behavior in the large majority of fighting arts would absolutely not be tolerated. And you've got to remember too that you're setting an example. This is why professional sportsmen take their role very seriously. They are a role model, whether they like it or not. So those people who are, behaving like idiots, they're influencing other people. And if you're a police officer, and I know we've got at least one here, you'll see that. You get all these arrogant young kids who have watched UFC and they all think they're Conor McGregor. And Conor McGregor may be a really nice guy by himself. In fact, he probably is. But the fact of the matter is the persona he projects as a professional fighter is nothing like that at all. Oh, Sal, glad you made it. I'll see you Wednesday too. I'm coming down the dojo. Next week I start on Wednesdays again. I'm up here at the mountain, but I'm starting on Wednesday next week at Karumbu. Gi, or waza, technique. The gi of shingi-tai refers to the physical techniques and skills of our art. First, refine your technique through training that allows you to master core principles of movement and coordination, zeroing in on the finer detail of movement as you train skills correctly brings mastery. Better to master a few than know many superficially. Even better is to master the principles of movement at the base of skills. By mastering key principles, you can understand the essence of many techniques, even if you have never practiced them before. So this is what often I'll do with the students is we'll explain a principle to them. And I won't even really teach the technique, actually. Sometimes just explain what you got here is a guy's going to throw a punch. So what are you going to do with that? And you let them play with it. And, the principles are, first of all, you've got to do everything you can not to get hit. So how do you do that? Well, you move, you change angles, you cover, you block. And then after they have that principle, they've been playing around in their head for a while, then you go, okay, well, let's look at this. Let's refine a technique here. How about this? He's going to throw that block. How about you duck underneath and come out to the side and hit? Or how about when he throws that block, you tap it down and move to the side? Or how about when he throws that block, throws that punch, and he catches you off guard, boom, you cover and you get your cock's comb up nice and high. So then you start to introduce upper block, boom. Well, this is why we do upper block. Look, it bisects that line. But the reality is when you're in a fight, you're not going to go, 2, 3. So what do? Bang, you knock it aside. And there's the upper block now. So now you go from this being the upper block to that being the block and the upper block being the takeaway. Because then what's next? If he throws 1 or 2, it might throw 3. So if I can block it down, come in, take control of him like that, everything changes then. While translating Kyokushinkai on the ultimate truth, whether in his book, The Kyokushin Way, whereas in his book, The Kyokushin Way, oh, Clarence, I was just reading that message. Oh, no. Translate as a society for the search of the ultimate truth. Yes, it's a non-stop. That's true. One word makes a huge difference. Yep, that's true too. You look into that abyss of anger and violence, and it's a deep, deep abyss. And some people never get out of it their whole lifetime. And it actually traumatizes them to the point where anger and violence become their norm rather than inner peace and calm. I tend to believe that the human condition is one of inner, equilibrated peace and love. And anything that's separate to that is taking you further and further away from your centered, equilibrated state. And people who habitually look into that abyss of violence and anger, habitually their whole centered equilibrium shifts to one side or the other. Or sometimes it's not even a shift to the side, it's a shift up or down. So that anger and violence becomes hyper aggressive, or the anger and violence becomes like this storm, and then finally it explodes like a bomb, you know. That's true, Clarence. I mean, it's a constant search. And the beauty of it is, even when you find it, you'll keep searching because you just never know whether there's more to it. But also the act of searching is what delivers it to you. So, you know, you're not going to stop searching once you get it, because inertia is a terrible thing. You'll end up going backwards. Well, so who are we fighting? That's a good question. The reality is, it's like, remember, I may have quoted that poem, As I Pondered in Silence. I'm going to do a search, see if I have it on my computer. That's the Walt Whitman poem. Quoted it somewhere else in the book. I'm just going to quickly look. But that poem, I found it. There we go. It is in a different section of the book. The poem by Walt Whitman, As I Pondered in Silence. It starts, as I pondered in silence, returning. So the scenario is, he's this poet, and he's got the candle burning, and it's late at night, and he's bleary-eyed, and he's trying to stay awake as he's writing poems. And then the poem starts off, as I pondered in silence, returning upon my poems, considering, lingering long, a phantom arose before me with distrustful aspect, terrible in beauty, age, and power, the genius of poets of old lands, as to me directing like flame its eyes, with finger pointing to many immortal songs, and menacing voice, I'm reading it really small because I'm just reading a gif of it. And menacing voice, what singest thou, it said. Knowest thou not there is but one theme for ever enduring bards, and that is the theme of war, the fortune of battles, the making of perfect soldiers. I love that. It's one of my favorite quotes. So like Mike says, as we as Budo talk of fighting, what are we talking about? Well, like Walt Whitman says, the theme of all the poets of all the ages and all the poems ever written is about one thing, and that is the theme of war and the making of warriors. Okay, and that war, everything is a war. And some people go, well, I love, a world without war. Well, you're not going to have it. I mean, I think in 7,000 or 8,000 years of known history, there's been periods of a total of maybe 250 years where there hasn't been a war going on. And the other thing that I was taught to relate it to is the breath. Everything comes down to a single breath. What causes a breath? Well, it's a war. And that war is simply the war between carbon dioxide and oxygen. So you hold your breath, and eventually what will happen is the carbon dioxide will build up so much, you'll have to breathe and take some more oxygen. So with every breath, you've got a war going on between oxygen and deoxygenation. And So the most fundamental unit in my mind of measurement, the breath, is a war going on. And like I just say, good to see you, Karen. Didn't see your name. Yes, these are the concepts that we it's very centered, simple context, concepts. That simple understanding makes it so easy to maintain beginner's mind. Just saying ultimate truth is a statement that inflates the ego, the opposite of what karate tries to achieve. The whole video reminds me of Invictus, my personal favorite. Well, yeah, and I think I've even quoted Invictus in my book. So it's a great poem. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. It's a beautiful poem. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. There's beautiful words. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. And the last verse is, I've quoted that last verse every time I go and do a mental preparation talk to a professional footy team or something. I always quote this verse. It matters not how straight the gate, straight as in narrow, how charged with punishments the soul, the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. It's beautiful words. That's the Invictus poem, the one that Nelson Mandela read to himself every day for 27 years. It's a beautiful poem, DC. I quote it quite regularly. That one and another one called Opportunity. And if I could find Opportunity, it's a stunning poem. And I know I've quoted that in the new version of the Budo Karate of Masoyama as well. And I'm just quickly going through to see if I can find it. But that's a stunning poem. It's written by a guy named Edward Roland Sill. And the thing about Invictus too is that if you were to know that guy's life, William Henley, who wrote that poem, I mean, I think his daughter died of polio or something when she was 5, and he just had one setback after another, and it can only be that sort of life that can produce words like that. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my scroll. I mean, they're stunning words, or words that may change, but suffering builds endurance. Endurance gives us hope, and hope does not desert us. That's true. Where are those words from? Kieran, my buddy Kieran there sent me a beautiful book of poetry, which I haven't read the whole thing, of course. I'll probably never read the whole thing, but I pick out poems from it. And it's a collection of poems about war and warriors, and stunning, It's possibly beaten down by life, yet remain unconquered. Ask anyone living. Yeah, indeed. Some people, in fact, it's like this. I was talking to my friend today about the virus. Some people have been beaten down by it. Some people are living in literal fear. They're looking out the door, wondering if that person walking past is going to kill them from an infection. Yes, that's beautiful. Romans 5, 3-5. I'm going to look that up, Kieran. Thanks for that. But other people have thrived. I mean, it's just the attitude you take with it. Now, I'm getting off course here. Can I keep going? I will, I think. Gi refers to the physical techniques, and still zeroing in, even better, is to master the principles of. Okay, here we go. By mastering key principles, you can understand the essence of many techniques, even if you have never practiced them before. Musashi states it in this way. If you master the principles, when you freely beat one man, you beat any man in the world. The spirit of defeating a man is the same for 10 million men. The strategist makes small things into big things. The principle of strategy is having one thing to know 10,000 things. Add to your skills only as you master core principles of movement, timing, and coordination. Without mastering key principles, your technique will always be lacking. The importance of patiently working to master core principles before throwing yourself into more and more techniques cannot be underestimated. This is a widely spoken principle, yet not many actually do it properly. An ounce of right principles mastered beats a ton of techniques. Although right principles combined with a wider and wider range of techniques is hard to beat. Additionally, training techniques before ensuring the key principles are sufficiently understood and mastered is counterproductive, as undoing bad habits is much harder than building good ones. The problem is we've got an instant gratification society, and karate schools feel compelled to constantly introduce new stuff. And honestly, I don't care. This is why my dojos maybe have 20 members on a good day, because what we will do, though, is my students will do quite well. And we're karate guys, for example, every now and then we'll compete in Brazilian jiu-jitsu contests. And I can tell you now that the students of mine who compete in BJJ, often have never been to a BJJ school, or if they have, they've gone just to test what we've been doing in the karate dojo against BJJ guys, and always come home with a big smile on their face going, it works the bomb. And they'll go to BJJ tournaments and compete at novice levels, of course, because they are novices. And they'll compete and they'll win. They'll come away with gold medals. And in fact, at the last tournament, last year before the virus, two of my students took out first and second in their division in a BJJ competition. And it's not because they don't know a fraction of the techniques that the people they fought know. But what they did do really, really well was a very, very, very deep level of survival and defensive ability, and sometimes only one or two finishes. So they could survive most attacks, but they could bring everything back to the one technique that they may know. Add to your skills only as you master them. Okay. Additionally, training techniques before ensuring key principles are sufficiently understood and mastered is counterproductive, as undoing bad habits is much harder. Anyone who's an instructor will tell you it's much harder to undo bad habits than it is to do good habits from the start. So the third part of shingi-tai, karada, physical body. It is through the body that the mind and technique are expressed. Yet the body is, as Yogananda described it, a treacherous friend. The body will retreat to a warm place of inactivity, growing stiff, soft, and fat, undoing months and years of disciplined effort in a flash if you allow it. Unless the mind remains in charge of the body, we are drawn through inertia into a state of safety and rest that is not conducive to mastery. In training the body, the four primary somatics, flexibility, strength, speed, and endurance, should be appropriately addressed. To those four physical qualities, we add a fifth for fighting, impact resilience, especially in the hands, legs, and torso. Our bodies have to be able to withstand strong impact as well as be able to support the forces our own techniques generate. Yet from the first training effort in the dojo, we realized that there is no separation between the body, the mind, and the mind. The hard training to make the body stronger, faster, fitter is determined by the degree of willpower and focus the mind guides it with. Okay, Mike, but that depends on the level of quality. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like meditation. Depth is the most important thing, but length is also important. You can't just get by with your meditation at 5-minute lots. You've got to go deep, but you've also got to stretch it out. Well, it's like training. You can do really short, sharp, hard 50-minute smash, hit out sessions, but you need length too. Okay, so it's the same with quality and quantity. You need quality, but that quality has to have a certain depth and breadth and so on, you know. Okay, Mike, sit down, grab a cup of tea. According to Mike Clark, this is from my book. According to Mike Clark, author of the award-winning book Shingi-tai, Karate Training for Body, Mind, and Spirit, the meaning of shingi-tai is as follows, and I quote, "The concept of shingi-tai has long since pointed the way for karateka to make progress by its insistence that the physical techniques of karate are understood through the development of your spirit, character. Shingi-tai acts as both a bridge and a barrier to those training in karate. Where techniques, gi, and physical fitness, tai, show signs of improvement relatively quickly once karate training has begun, your true character or spirit, shin, will inevitably take much longer to reveal itself. For many, the cultivation of the body through the techniques of karate is enough, but not for the serious karateka." And I end the quote. That's from Mike's book. Here, Shin focuses on character development. Clark continues, quoting the renowned master of karate, Shoshin Nagamine. In karate, we have a principle called shin-gi-tai. Shin means your spirit, gi means your technique, and tai means your body. To do karate well and to understand it properly, you have to harmonize these three things within you. In karate training, there is an overemphasis on gi and tai, the techniques and the body. The shin, spirit of a person, is often left behind. The technique and power seem to be the reason why some people are doing karate these days. But this was not the case 60 years ago. Today, there is a tendency to forget the building of a student's spirit and character. But this kind of maturity is very important, and I want to emphasize this point, end of quote. These words are a good interpretation of Shingi-tai. The key is, and I quote, "You have to harmonize these three things within you." It's true that some martial arts schools are 100% sport-oriented and have little interest in character development. That's their choice, and it is neither right nor wrong. Everything serves. It isn't my approach, but it works for some. Shin, however, is not just spirit, the development of character. Shin also refers to other aspects of the mind. Willpower, courage, discipline, and aggressiveness, just for starters, are also aspects of Shin. Well-designed karate systems that have stood the test of time develop all three keys, as long as the traditions and principles of training are adhered to. Like the three legs of a stool, correct training is incomplete without consideration being given to each aspect. With all three, an unwavering will, excellent technique drilled through proper training, and a strong, well-conditioned body in training, and a strong, well-conditioned body, training is complete. If one's training is sound and follows a well-designed and intelligent approach, as Masayama and other karate masters provided, it is not really possible to develop one area of Shingi-tai without also developing the others. When I consider the three inseparable aspects of Shingi-tai, two quotes from Solsai come to mind. The first, like Nagamine's quote above, highlights the importance of character development. And I quote, "Although it is important to study and train for skill in techniques, for the man who wishes to truly accomplish the way of Budo, it is more important to make his whole life in training and therefore aiming not just for skill and strength alone, but also for spiritual attainment." The second quote describes the willpower approach, the courage to face extreme challenges of life with fearlessness. And I quote, "Without real experience, there is no proof. Without proof, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no respect. Consider both the fighting spirit, willpower, and character development aspects of the mind, shin, to more fully understand the potential of shingi-tai. That is what makes Budo karate more than just a sport. In training, we primarily address the willpower aspect of shin to make the application of techniques as effective as possible. As Sosai says, when one applies tremendous will in the pursuit of success, there is proof of one's courage and skill. That earns respect, which lasts well beyond titles and trophies. You know that is so when you witness a fighter applying an unyielding will to every aspect of a match, yet doesn't get the decision. He still earns the respect of all who watched, and they have witnessed something noble. That respect is quickly lost, however, when the fighter behaves in a way that is ignoble, as is sometimes seen in professional fight sports, where there are often more dollars than cents. SENSE. The classic battles between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali come to mind. Here we see great champions applying their never say die will and elite world-class skills, not for 1 second giving up or backing down mentally or physically. And who won is not even important compared to the respect both fighters earned through the proof of their courage and will. And another aspect of that too that I want to mention is the use of steroids and drugs and so on. You know, it doesn't take a genius to tell when someone's used drugs. You literally, you go to the doctor, say, I've got a sniffy, I've got a runny nose, I'm sneezing. He goes, yeah, you got a cold. You don't go, well, doctor, prove it. So he takes a blood test and proves, yeah, I told you you got a cold. Well, it's the same with drugs, you know. They always say, I didn't take drugs. You know, you can't prove it. It's like that cyclist, what was his name? Armstrong, who fought, even challenged his best friends and sued them for millions. They knew he was doing the drugs. They were taking it with him. But because no drug test had ever proven it, he refused to admit it till finally he did. Well, it's like, you know, you see strong fighters and you respect their skills and you respect everything about them to a point. But when you know they've used drugs, that level of respect stops. And quite often you see that later on in their life, what goes around comes around, you know. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately. Okay, I get what you say now, Mike. Yep. DC, two things I've really been trying to focus on, Mushin and Shoshin. Mushin is the state of no mind, and Shoshin is the beginner's mind. Clark Sensei's book made me look deeper. It's a great book. Well done. Good on you. Good point. Harry, well, Shian, sorry, but I have to go. See ya. Your grandson's birthday, and I don't want to disappoint him. No. The responsibilities of a granddad are many. Mike, thank you, DC. Glad you've found something in it. Yes, that's good. Look, all I have left in this section is a box that I've included, and I want to read it because I think it's interesting. A word on the mental aspect of training. In Kyokushin, one of the core aims is to build a spirit of perseverance, a never say die courage that teaches us to accept even extraordinary challenges with equanimity. The spirit of perseverance and the spirit of us are central to any Kyokushin training. Sosai taught that when you're afraid, so is your opponent. When you're tired, so is he. And by taking just one more step forward, you can overcome your opponent and find victory. He never said you shouldn't be afraid. He said that when you feel fear, so does your opponent. Fighting is 90% in the mind. What does that actually mean? I see it as having two primary interpretations. Firstly, by training with focus and determination, welcoming the challenges that lie just beyond the comfort zone. That way, the hard work has been made in the preparation stage, and so the mind is unburdened by fears of running out of gas or being technically outdone, free to focus on the strategies and tactics of the match. So you're trained absolutely perfectly. Your mind has lots of room to worry about tactics and strategies and so on. You're not worried about starting to run out of steam. Oh, I should have trained harder. Oh, I should have done more rounds, that sort of thing. Secondly, willpower determines the outcome. A flexible, strong, and well-trained body is vital, as is a high level of skill. But the degree to which you can fully harness the body's potential is an element of the mind. I began chapter 8, Shingi-tai, by saying, mind is expressed through the body. Indeed, it is the mental habits of strength or weakness that determine the body you have. The body is expressed through technique, and technique is expressed through the application of willpower. End of quote. Unless the body is well conditioned and the technique is polished, the mind will have difficulty expressing its fullest potential. On page 123, I list the 26 qualities that, according to the Bhagavad Gita, make one godlike. Of these, the very first quality upon which all other qualities are built is fearlessness. In Masayama's book, The Kyokushin Way, the author primarily addresses mental and spiritual issues and devotes chapters to diligence, courage, and mind control. He points out that whilst skill is important, courage is essential. Courage, Sosai points out, is found by being resolved to do whatever it takes to attain your chosen goals and to be willing to abandon life itself for the sake of justice. Look your opponent in the eye and hold your courage for just one more second, one more minute, one more hour. That is the duty of the warrior. You owe that to yourself and everyone who has been there in your training. Okay, so that's that section that I wanted to read today. Let's have a look. Sorry, got to go, Mike. Thanks. Yep. At some point, could you please explain the origins of Kyokushin karate, kanji, embroidered on gis, as well as the style of calligraphy used? Also, as calligraphy master, it's just supposed to resemble a samurai sword. No. Powerful, powerful stuff. Good on you, Patty. You always say nice things, and I appreciate that. Good on you. Keep up the good work. And like I said, we're always thinking of you because my daughter's in Victoria. The poor thing graduated from uni. Her ceremony was yesterday, and we had to do it online. Would you believe? All it was a video and a bunch of names. We couldn't actually go with the hat and you know, all that wonderful stuff that when a parent celebrates a child's graduation or when the graduate celebrates as well. So, Patty, we're thinking of you and everyone in Victoria. Hang in there. I know you asked me about this calligraphy, so let me explain to the point that I understand. It's simply, and I'm going to, give me just 15 seconds. I'm going to grab my iPad. So I've got my iPad here so I can explain it a little more clearly in my poor Japanese writing. Good on you, Mike. Yeah, I really appreciate your input. And for those who don't know, which is everyone, that's how I met Mike. Actually, I'd never met Mike, but I'd read his books. I'd read particularly the Shingi-tai, and I wanted to quote him in my book. So I contacted him and asked for permission to quote, and that's where we began our friendship. And so there you go. And we've never physically met face to face, but as soon as I get to Perth, you can be sure that I'll drop in to say good day. Okay, so I've got my iPad, and I'm going to draw the kanji. I'm going to go a little bit thicker. I've got to measure out the thickness first. So that's roughly the kanji, right? Roughly. I mean, you could change the bottom one. What they do down the bottom is he kind of turned it backwards into like that. But the kanji itself is made up of 3 kanji, as you probably know. 1, 2, 3. The first one is kyoku, extreme. The second one is or extreme or ultimate. Second one is shin. So that's kyokushin. And the third one is kai, which means school or society. Okay, so what it is, it's very common on for the name of organizations or schools or anything like that to choose the kanji and then draw them in an artistic way. It's just like, for example, Coca-Cola. If you think about the font that they use to create the Coca-Cola logo is iconic now, and it's unique to Coca-Cola. And you can see that font, and yes, that's it, exactly those kanji. And if you see that font, even if the word isn't Coca-Cola, they'll use that font to suggest Coca-Cola. That's how iconic that font has become. Well, Kyokushinkai actually, in many respects, started a whole movement. There's all kinds of organizations now that run the kanji together. So the gentleman that wrote it was a good friend of Sosai's, Hara Motoki Sensei. I'll just type his name in for you. Hara Motoki Sensei. He's the calligraphy master that did it for Sosai as a gift. And just as Noro Sensei, Noro Sensei is the one that did the famous Ichigeki, or let me see if I can actually find it on my thing, the famous Ichigeki, or even he was the one that did that big Kyokushin kanji at the Fifth World Tournament. That kanji is huge. This is my latest kanji, by the way. That's a photo of my latest kanji, which I'm going to use as part of my logo, which is the Bu from Budo. But if I can find Noro Sensei's version, this is Noro Sensei's. Now, if you know kanji, that's the kanji for Liu or dragon. So it's a kanji for dragon, but you see when he does it, he kind of creates this feeling of a dragon, the incredible movement of a dragon. So the calligraphy masters get a real feel for it. Years ago, I had this student at my dojo in Brisbane who he didn't tell me. Someone else told me. He said, "Do you know who that guy is?" I said, "No." He says, he was like a 21-year-old kid who in Japan was recognized as a prodigy of calligraphy. And I said, "Is this true?" That and there are certain levels, they have dans, 4th dan, 5th dan, 6th dan, but after that there is a level where you receive a name, and that name can only be received by being handed down from a master. And he'd received that name at the age of like 19. He was so incredibly gifted as a calligrapher. But he was just this knockabout kid. He had earrings, Japanese guy, earrings, and he just used to come into the dojo and train. And I asked him one day, "Can you write Kyokushin?" He goes, "Nah, come on, I don't want to do that sort of stuff." I said, "No, look, I know. Well, I'll never ask you again. Just write Kyokushin." So he pulled out a piece of paper and a brush. I had some brushes there, and he's just going, "Oh, come on," and he's like got a cigarette behind his ear, and he goes, and then he takes the pen and he looks at it, and it was just one of those brush pens, nothing special. And then all of a sudden, you see his spine go. And the focus goes in, and he just looks at that paper, and he literally just goes, and he takes a breath, and he goes, and he giggles again, and he was almost shy. But there on the paper were these kanji, which I still have today. He wrote Kyokushin. It's just like so powerful. Well, that kanji by Haramotoki Sensei, Kyokushin Kai, this one here, is iconic, and that was Sosai wanted it. He used to call it the Kyokushin Kai, the Society of Kyokushin. Later on, he started to refer to it as Kyokushin Karate. So anyway, that's a little bit of information about the origin of the kanji. I hope that helps what you're looking for. And if you want to start Shodo, it's very, very, I hate to say it, but it's kind of difficult to get good instruction. But depending on where do you live, DC? And you may find teachers around here and there. But the trick is just to find a good teacher, someone who can help you to get the technique correct. I'm looking for a pen, but see if this is a pen, one of the things that you have to make sure you do. Yeah, I know there is a Japanese calligraphy teacher in Brisbane, because I've spoken to her myself. But for example, we write with a pen at an angle. You see, we write like that. But in calligraphy, you don't. You write it with, to get control of the brush point 360 degrees, you write it with vertical. And it's just a point of mastery. There is one kanji, which I'm not very good at, which will tell you how bad my calligraphy is. But there is one kanji, which I'm using my finger now. That's the kanji, A-N-A. Okay, and that kanji essentially is the Kihon kanji. If you practice that kanji, let me just kind of funk it up a little here and play around with it. If you practice that kanji, you see, I just did it in a lighter color there just for fun. But that kanji contains all the key strokes that you need to learn. The 1, 2, down 3, across and down 4, 5, down. It contains all those key strokes that you need for calligraphy. So if you can find a teacher, and my suggestion would be to say to her, look, I don't want to learn everything. What I need to learn is you come up with a series of kanji. So you could say, I want to learn Kyokushin, I want to learn Us, I want to learn Nintai, perseverance, I want to learn Sekinin, I want to learn Karate, I want to learn Do, Michi. If you come up with, say, half a dozen key kanji, and then ask her to help you with those kanji, it'll make the world a difference. And that way you don't have to learn all the kanji. You simply focus on those particular ones based around, and see, there's another thing too, which is important. I'll get rid of that. So, for example, where are we? Guide. So look, so can you see light on that? I don't know if you can see it, but I'll draw it out here so you can see. See, there's a square. I just drew can you see? I'm trying to hide it from the light. Square with a box. Well, that gives you the guideline. It's like when you're a kid, you learn how to write calligraphy in particular lines. So, for example, in English, you just have the straight lines like that. Then when you learn English, you learn all the, see, that's just my ABCD, but you learn how to obey certain fundamental rules. The down strokes are parallel, and the spacing is uniform. See, that sort of thing. Well, it's the same with calligraphy. You get this square going on, and then you learn to do your square. Oops, bugger, I just accidentally knocked it. So there's your square, right? And then what you do is just answering someone here. So what you do is you use that as the guide. So, for example, you try to get just like in English, everything's parallel. With this, for example, let me write the kanji for right. It's a good example. Unfortunately, that square behind makes it look like it's incorrect, but let me just, even if if I do it in red here, See, there's the kanji for writing. Well, you see, you want the distance. You want the distance between all the lines the same. See, and just as long as they're all equidistant, well, then your kanji essentially. And then what you can start to do is that's when you start to free it up a little bit like that. And you can change it as long as you obey those rules of the parallels and the distances apart. Yep, that's the kanji for ichigeki. Let me go back to here, get it off, clear that, get it off red, change this to that. Let me see if I can do the ichigeki in a way that I won't be too ashamed of, because it's kind of tricky. That's kind of ichigeki. One blow. Let me go to this type here. I'm doing it with my finger, by the way, so it won't be as good. But there's ichigeki. Yeah, we have a lesson in kanji. But ichigeki is a beautiful kanji too, and that kanji that kanji I showed you before of the dragon, the master that wrote that is the same master that wrote that ichigeki that one of the organizations has used. That, by the way, that was the Matsui group was using that, and they kind of tried to hold on to a pretty tight, copyright control. But they recently got taken to court by, of all people, the family of the calligrapher. And the family of the calligrapher actually said, no, that kanji was for Sosai and all of Kyokushin. It wasn't exclusively for one organization. So actually the Matsui organization lost those rights. So people who have been avoiding using that ichigeki now have the right to use it for whatever it's worth, Michael. Now, is that the Michael Brown that used to train with me in Brisbane many years ago? If it is, g'day. If it's not, hello anyway. But look, there you go. That was a reading. Usually the first one. The second one is also Liu, but if you have a look at the kanji, it's like a shortened version, if you like. The second one is a shortened version of the first one. The first one, I'll pull my pen out. So if you have a look at Liu, let me clear this first. Liu that you've written there, so that's the first half of Liu. The second half, which you add on, is like that. So that was the kanji that Noro Sensei wrote that I showed you before. But the second one you've done there, where are we? The second one you've done there is kind of like, it's kind of a shortened version if you compare that to the left-hand side. See, there's the left-hand side of the first one. And that's Tatsu, the one that you were just talking about. You see, it's kind of similar, but it's a shorthand version of that. But anyway, yeah. Good on you. Oh, nice to meet you, Mike. Let me put the camera on my wife. My wife just walked past. She's got a face pack on. She looks like the Hulk, all green. Nice to meet you, Mike. We're in the States here from, and welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, good on you guys. Look, we could talk all day. I can talk underwater, but I hope you enjoyed that read. If I've read it before, I'm sorry that I doubled up, but it's some good information. And I wanted to mention it because I was hoping Mike would come, because that's where I've quoted Mike in the book there. Thanks for everything. hope you enjoyed that. If you have any more questions about calligraphy and so on, join Patreon. My Patreon, get all that information you want. Daniel, good on you, man. Thanks for coming. Hope all's going well. Hope you had a look at the logbook, and I'll send you one soon, Daniel Langworthy. Chris, good to see you. Us. Hope you're safe in New York there. Texas, good on you, Mike. Whereabouts in Texas? I used to spend a bit of time in Dallas, Fort Worth, but haven't been for a few years now. Good on you. Thanks, guys. Paul, Kniep aus Deutschland. Thank you for coming. Good on you, Al. See you soon. See you on Wednesday. Yes, at the dojo. And Frederick from Sweden, thank you. Very interesting for me too to have the discussion. Thanks, Rochelle, Marco. Thanks, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday with some more stuff. Good on you, Rod. I'll see you on Monday for another training session. Thanks.